The world survives, but survival here is not measured in comfort or peace. It is measured in suffering endured, in blood spilled, in faith unbroken. To live on this planet is to pay a price so steep it defies comprehension, and yet its people pay it willingly, even eagerly, convinced that their agony is the purest expression of devotion. This is the cost of eternal zeal, the weight that presses down upon every soul, binding them in chains of faith they cannot see, but can never escape. The first cost is the body. From birth, every person is conscripted into a life of labor, prayer, or war. Their bodies are consumed in manufactorums where the air itself poisons them, in fields where starvation gnaws, in battlefields where bullets carve flesh like scripture. The average life is short, brutal, and unremarkable. Children die before reaching adulthood. The elderly collapse in silence long before their hair can turn gray. The survivors are little more than husks, their backs bent, their skin scarred, their lungs blackened. Yet none of this is lamented. Each wound is reframed as sacrifice, each scar is blessing, each death is ascension. The body is nothing but fuel for the furnace of faith. The second cost is the mind. On other worlds, a man might dream, a woman might wonder, a child might imagine. Here, thought itself is shackled. Every idea is filtered through the lens of devotion. Every question crushed before it can take shape. The people do not dream of freedom, for they cannot imagine it. They do not long for peace, for they have never known it. Their only aspiration is to endure, to suffer longer, to die louder in the Emperor's name. Curiosity, individuality, ambition, all are branded as heresy. The people's thoughts are not their own. They belong to the priests who shape them, the rituals that bind them, the chants that echo endlessly through their minds until nothing remains but obedience. The third cost is the soul. Doubt is annihilated, mercy condemned, compassion punished. To feel pity for a condemned heretic is to share their guilt. To hesitate before killing is to betray the Emperor. The people are taught not only to obey, but to destroy every trace of humanity within themselves that might resist. Parents turn in children, children betray parents, neighbors expose one another, not out of malice, but because the faith demands it. The bonds that should unite them as humans are severed and replaced with a single bond to the Emperor. Their souls are stripped bare, reshaped into vessels of fanaticism, emptied of anything that might contradict the endless cycle of worship and suffering. The fourth cost is the planet itself. Its soil is stained with blood, its cities perpetually rebuilt from ruins, its fields tilled not with plows but with the bones of the dead. The manufactorums roar without pause, spewing smoke that darkens the skies, choking the people beneath a pall of ash. Forests vanish to feed the war machine, rivers turn black with filth, mountains collapse into quarries of stone for endless cathedrals. The planet devours itself to sustain its fanaticism, consuming resources, land, and life with no thought for tomorrow. Yet the people call it holy. They believe their dying world is proof of devotion, that its wounds mirror their own, and that its suffering will one day be rewarded in eternity. And then there is the final cost, eternity itself. For all their sacrifice, for all their suffering, for all their zeal, there is no guarantee of salvation. The Emperor does not speak to them. He does not answer their prayers. He sits silent on his golden throne, sustained only by endless sacrifice, unseeing, unhearing, unknowing. The people believe their devotion secures them a place in his light, but belief is all they have. No voice confirms it, no vision reassures it, no hand reaches down to lift them from their misery. They live and die in silence, and the silence itself becomes divine. Their entire existence is built upon a promise that may never be fulfilled. Yet despite this, the people endure. They endure not because their lives are easy, but because their suffering has been weaponized against them. They are told that pain is holy, that hunger is sanctity, that death is reward. They are told that to live without suffering would be to dishonor the Emperor, that to die without agony would be to waste the gift of life, and so they embrace their torment, wrapping themselves in chains and calling it freedom, crushing their own humanity and calling it faith. They do not see their world as prison, but as temple. They do not see their deaths as loss, but as triumph. This is the genius of fanaticism. It makes the slave grateful for the lash, the martyr eager for the pyre. The Imperium reaps the benefit of this endless zeal. Armies raised from this world fight with unmatched fervor, hurling themselves into battles that others would flee. Factories churn out weapons day and night, powered by flesh that never protests. The ecclesiarchy points to the planet as proof of what faith can achieve, holding it up as a model for others to follow. But the truth is far darker. This world is not a model, it is a warning. It survives not because it thrives, but because it burns itself down faster than its enemies can destroy it. Its people are not alive, they are consumed, every breath, every heartbeat. Every drop of blood given not for themselves, but for a God who never answers, in the end. This is the price of eternal zeal, a world that exists only to sisters, but from civilians. When battles turn grim, they order processions into the front lines, unarmed masses marching into fire so that their deaths might distract the enemy and buy time for the faithful. Tens of thousands perish in moments, their bodies torn apart, their blood soaking the fields. Yet the survivors do not weep. They kneel in the mud, chanting praises, thanking the emperor for allowing their loved ones to die as offerings. Their grief is twisted into pride, their pain into devotion, until even the annihilation of entire communities becomes a cause for celebration. Even in the midst of war, the rituals never cease. Before each battle, priests lead entire regiments in hours-long sermons, forcing them to chant until their voices crack and bleed. Banners of saints are carried high into the smoke, their fabric scorched by fire, their poles splintered by bullets. Relics are kissed by trembling lips before soldiers charge, convinced that these sacred fragments will shield them from death. And when the fighting ends, the fields of corpses are not mourned but sanctified. Bones are gathered and displayed in shrines, weapons salvaged and enshrined as relics, blood collected and poured over altars as holy water. For the enemy, this fanaticism is as terrifying as it is unstoppable. They find themselves facing not soldiers, but entire populations willing to die without hesitation. Tactics crumble in the face of such blind zeal. Trenches filled with fire are overwhelmed by waves of screaming worshippers. Strongholds fall beneath the press of countless bodies hurling themselves against the walls until the enemy is buried beneath a tide of flesh. Even victory against such people feels hollow, for to kill them is to grant them what they most desire, death in service of their faith. And yet, the cost to the planet is catastrophic. Wars leave cities in ruins, fields scorched, and populations decimated. The people starve, the manufacturums collapse, disease spreads unchecked. But still they call it holy. They believe their suffering is proof of devotion, that the emperor's gaze lingers on them more closely than on any other world. They rebuild not with sorrow, but with fervor, convinced that their destruction is not punishment, but reward. The ashes of their cities become altars, the ruins of their homes transformed into shrines, the bones of their dead into relics. War does not weaken their fanaticism, it deepens it. For the ecclesiarchy, war is both risk and opportunity. Each conflict provides a stage upon which they can display the zeal of their flock, a theater of blood that reinforces their sermons. When enemies burn, the priests declare it proof of divine favor. When their own people die in droves, they declare it proof of divine testing. There is no outcome that cannot be framed as holy. Defeat is martyrdom, victory is blessing, annihilation is ascension. In this way, war becomes not only survival but validation. The more they suffer, the more they believe. And always the Inquisition watches. For in the fires of war, fanaticism can blaze too brightly. If the people begin to worship their own zeal more than the emperor, if the priests begin to claim victories as their own, if whispers of miracles spread too widely, the Inquisition intervenes. Purges are carried out even in the midst of battle, inquisitors dragging priests from their pulpits, executing commanders in the streets, silencing chants that drift too close to heresy. The war continues without pause, the people barely noticing as their leaders vanish, so consumed are they by the ecstasy of devotion. When the smoke clears, the planet lies broken, but its spirit unshaken. Rebuilding begins immediately, with prayers chanted over every stone lifted, every corpse buried, every machine repaired. The people tell themselves that their suffering has elevated them above other worlds, that their wounds are badges of honor. They believe they are closer to the emperor than ever before, that each war sanctifies them further, purifies them more completely, until nothing remains but faith and fire. This is what fanaticism in times of war looks like. A people who see no distinction between worship and slaughter, no line between faith and death. To outsiders, it is madness, a descent into destruction that consumes body and soul alike. To the Imperium, it is a weapon, terrible but useful. And to the people themselves, it is the only truth they know. War is not something that happens to them. War is what they are. They are born for it, they live for it, and they die for it, convinced that each drop of blood spilled brings them closer to the throne of the Emperor. Healers. They are inquisitors or their acolytes, blending seamlessly into the machinery of faith, listening, watching, waiting. Their true power lies not in armies or banners, but in silence. None know who they are until it is far too late. When suspicion arises, the Inquisition moves with merciless precision. Entire households vanish overnight, their doors smashed open by black-clad enforcers, their screams swallowed by the night. Neighbors awaken to find homes emptied, belongings scattered, blood staining the floors. No explanation is given. To ask questions is to share the fate of the condemned. And so the people whisper prayers and avert their eyes, reminding themselves that those taken must have sinned, for the Emperor's servants are never wrong. Fear keeps them obedient. Terror keeps them silent. The priests of the ecclesiarchy tread carefully around these shadowed figures. Though they rule the world with sermons and fire, they know well that their power is not absolute. Too much zeal, too much cruelty, too much spectacle, and the Inquisition will strike them down as easily as it strikes heretics. And so a strange balance emerges. The priests preach suffering, demand sacrifice, and orchestrate endless rituals, but always with one eye cast toward the unseen inquisitors in their midst. Their voices thunder in sermons, but beneath that thunder lies caution, a fear that they themselves might one day be judged. The Inquisition's purges are swift and merciless. Entire districts have been declared tainted, their populations marched into the streets and executed en masse. Sometimes the reason is clear, a whisper of chaos worship, a relic deemed impure, a festival that went too far. Other times no reason is ever given. The ground runs red, the bodies are stacked like cordwood, and the world continues without pause. The priests declare it a holy cleansing, and the people, terrified, chant in agreement. No one dares mourn, for mourning the condemned is itself a crime. For all its terror, the Inquisition does not seek to destroy fanaticism. It seeks to harness it, to prune it, to shape it into a weapon that serves the Imperium rather than consumes it. It allows the rituals, the sacrifices, the endless labor, because these forge loyalty and obedience. But it watches for the spark that might ignite rebellion or draw chaos. If a priest begins to claim too much power, he vanishes. If a festival begins to blur into madness, it is burned out. If whispers of visions or miracles spread too far, the Inquisition extinguishes them before they can grow. It does not care for the faith of the people. It cares only for control. To the average citizen, the Inquisition is a shadow of dread, but also a symbol of reassurance. They are told that inquisitors are the Emperor's most perfect servants, walking among them to root out heresy. They believe that every purge is justice, every disappearance necessary. Their fear becomes loyalty, and their loyalty strengthens the grip of their masters. In this way, the Inquisition sustains the very fanaticism it regulates, ensuring that the people cling tighter to their faith, terrified of what lies beyond it. But there are darker stories whispered in the corners of the manufactorums and behind the locked doors of tenements. Stories of inquisitors who use their power to settle old scores, who twist suspicion into a weapon of personal vengeance. Stories of innocents dragged away and tortured until they confess crimes they never committed. Stories of entire families annihilated not for heresy, but to silence a single careless word. The people do not dare repeat these tales openly, but they know them, they feel them, and in their hearts they tremble. For if the priests demand their lives in the name of faith, the Inquisition can erase them for no reason at all. It is said that on some nights, when the torches burn low and the fog rolls in, the inquisitors gather in secret. They meet not in cathedrals, but in basements and bunkers, poring over endless reports of whispers and suspicions. They debate not whether the people are loyal, but whether their fanaticism burns too brightly. For the Inquisition knows what others deny, that zeal is a double-edged blade. A people who will die without hesitation are valuable, but a people who believe too strongly may turn their fire upon the Imperium itself. Fanaticism is power, but power is dangerous, and so they prune it with blood, shaping the planet into something useful, something loyal, something that can bleed endlessly without ever turning against its masters. The people, of course, do not see this. To them, the Inquisition is not a knife, but a guiding light. They are told to obey, and they obey. They are told to fear, and they fear. They are told to trust, and they trust, even as their neighbors vanish and their families are destroyed. The brilliance of the system is that it does not matter whether they truly believe. It matters only that they never stop kneeling, and so the Inquisition watches always. It is the shadow in every sermon, the silence in every chant, the unseen eyes in every crowd. It does not need to be visible to be present. The people shape their lives around its gaze, whether it is truly there or not. They obey because they believe someone is watching. They fear because they know someone might be listening. This is the true power of the Inquisition, not its guns, not its torturers, not its executions, but its silence. Silence that weighs heavier than chains, silence that keeps an entire world prostrate before the throne of terror. This is life under the Inquisition's watchful eye. A world already enslaved by faith, bound tighter still by fear. A world where every prayer is whispered with caution, every hymn sung with desperation, every sacrifice made with the knowledge that it may not be enough. The priests demand the body, the manufacturers consume the flesh, but the Inquisition demands the soul. And on this planet, as in all things, the people give it willingly, because to refuse is unthinkable. To doubt is to die. To question is to vanish. And so the cycle continues, endless and unbroken. The planet sustained not only by its fanaticism, but by the silent, merciless hand that ensures it never wavers. Priests lead them in chants, binding their voices into one thunderous roar before branding them with symbols of devotion. By the time they don uniforms, they already believe themselves martyrs in waiting. The training of these recruits is less about tactics than it is about piety. They are taught to march in formation, yes, and to fire their lasguns with precision. But above all, they are taught to pray as they fight. Drill masters bark not only commands but litanies, forcing their soldiers to chant with every strike of the bayonet, with every pull of the trigger. A battle cry here is indistinguishable from a hymn, a charge from a sermon. Their bodies are molded into weapons, but their minds are honed into instruments of blind obedience. Incapable of hesitation, incapable of mercy, discipline is absolute, enforced not with simple punishment but with ritualized humiliation. A soldier who falters is not scolded privately but condemned before their peers, forced to kneel, while priests flay the flesh from their backs in symbolic purification. Those who commit greater sins, hesitation in combat, failure to carry out orders, are executed as heretics, their deaths treated as offerings rather than failures. The survivors are taught to watch without pity, to let the screams of their comrades fuel their own faith. For here, compassion is treason and mercy is weakness. Only devotion remains. When these soldiers march to war, they do so like priests leading a congregation. Their banners are painted not with emblems of regiments, but with icons of saints. Their vehicles inscribed with verses of scripture. Vox units blare hymns instead of orders, drowning the battlefield in chants of devotion. They fight not for victory, but for sacrifice. Death is the expected outcome, survival a surprise. And so they hurl themselves at enemies with suicidal fervor, believing every wound, every drop of blood spilled, is a tithe paid to the emperor's throne. Entire regiments raised on this world are infamous across the Imperium for their fanaticism. Commanders elsewhere often struggle to control them, for their zeal makes them reckless. They will charge fortified positions without hesitation, throw themselves against tanks with little more than knives and grenades, and refuse to retreat even when annihilation is certain. To them, destruction is not failure but fulfillment. They measure success not in victories won, but in martyrs created. For every battlefield where they fall, new hymns are written, new festivals declared, new relics fashioned from their shattered weapons and armor. The planetary defense forces, too, embody this zeal. Their task is not only to protect the planet, but to serve as living proof of its faith. They patrol the streets as holy wardens, clad in armor adorned with scripture, their lasguns marked with sigils of purity. They do not see themselves as guards, but as shepherds, ensuring the flock remains loyal. When riots or doubts arise, they do not pacify the people, they purge them. Entire districts are cleansed in fire if heresy is suspected, with the soldiers chanting hymns as the flames consume homes and bodies alike. Their duty is not protection, but purification, and they carry it out without hesitation. Every campaign fought beyond the planet is treated as pilgrimage. Soldiers depart in vast processions, their transports decorated like funeral barges, their steps accompanied by endless chanting. Families line the streets not to weep, but to cheer, knowing their loved ones may never return. They do not mourn this. For they believe that death in service is not loss but ascension. The bodies that return are paraded in reliquaries, their bones displayed in shrines, their names etched into walls of martyrdom. And those who return alive are greeted not as veterans, but as survivors of holy trial, expected to bear scars as badges of faith and to train the next generation in the same fanatic creed. What makes this system most terrifying is that it erases the line between soldier and priest. The two become one, indistinguishable in purpose and devotion. A sermon delivered in a cathedral is no different from a command shouted on the battlefield. A bullet fired into the skull of a heretic is treated with the same reverence as a prayer whispered in the quiet of dawn. War is the religion here, and the religion is war. The soldier's lasgun is a censer, the chainsword a sacrificial knife, the tank a mobile altar upon which blood is spilled in rivers. Even the wounded are not spared from this cycle. Soldiers who lose limbs are not retired, but reforged with crude augmetics or repurposed as living examples of devotion. They are paraded before new recruits, their broken bodies praised as monuments of sacrifice. Many beg to return to the front lines, crawling if they must, eager to give whatever remains of them in one final offering. To live without battle is shame. To die in battle is salvation. The planet breeds not warriors, but zealots who cannot imagine a purpose beyond bloodshed. And so the military becomes the highest altar, its wars the greatest rituals, its casualties the most sacred sacrifices. Other worlds may field armies out of necessity, but here, the army itself is the purpose. It exists not to defend, not to conquer, but to bleed. Every soldier who falls strengthens the faith of those who remain. Every regiment annihilated proves the Emperor's glory. Every campaign lost is transformed into a festival of martyrdom. Victory is irrelevant. Only devotion matters. This is why the Imperium tolerates such fanaticism, even encourages it. The planet provides endless waves of soldiers willing to die without question, their zeal making them perfect tools of the Imperium's endless wars. They may lack finesse, they may lack strategy, but they possess something far more valuable. The unshakable certainty that death is not an end, but an offering. And in a galaxy where survival itself is fleeting, such certainty is a weapon as potent as any bolter or lascannon. This is the role of the military on the most fanatical planet in the Imperium. Not an army of men, but an army of priests. Not warriors seeking victory, but martyrs seeking death. Each battle is a mass, each campaign a pilgrimage, each war a sermon written in blood. The military does not defend the people. It does not protect them. It consumes them, transforms them, sanctifies them in fire and iron, until nothing remains but obedience. On this world, the soldier is not merely a man with a weapon. He is the Emperor's blade, sharpened on the whetstone of fanaticism, forever ready to cut away the flesh of humanity itself in the name of devotion. And the doubter is always alone, surrounded by accusers who believe they are saving themselves by condemning another. When the ecclesiarchy learns of a doubter, there is no quiet correction, no gentle guidance back to the path. There is only spectacle. Doubt must be crushed in public so that all may see and fear. The accused is dragged into the open, bound in chains or nailed to wooden frames, while the priests call upon the crowd to bear witness. Their supposed sins are read aloud, hesitations, stumbles, whispers, and each one is magnified until the smallest misstep becomes a crime against the Emperor himself. The crowd roars, not out of hatred for the individual, but out of terror. Their voices join in condemnation because to remain silent is to invite suspicion upon themselves. The punishments vary, but all are brutal. Some doubters are scourged until their bodies break, their blood splattering across the stones as the priests declare their screams proof of guilt. Others are flayed alive, their skins hung as banners at the gates of the manufactorums, reminders that even a single thought of resistance will strip you bare. Many are burned, bound to pyres that roar high into the night sky, their flesh consumed while the crowd chants in unison, drowning their cries beneath waves of worship. The ashes are scattered over the fields as fertilizer of faith, as if even their remains must serve the Emperor. But it is not always death. Sometimes the ecclesiarchy chooses a different path for those who doubt. These are the ones remade as examples, reshaped into servitors. Their bodies are mutilated, their minds lobotomized, their humanity erased. Once they were men, women, and children. Now they are machines of flesh, blank-eyed husks that shuffle through the factories, chained forever to labor they can neither refuse nor understand. Their voices, once used to whisper hesitation, are silenced forever. Their existence becomes proof that doubt does not die quickly. It lingers as eternal punishment. The sight of them is enough to freeze any wavering thought in the minds of the faithful. There are stories told in whispers of those who tried to resist. Doubters who fled into the wastelands, hoping the deserts or mountains might shield them from the ecclesiarchy's gaze. None are ever seen again. Perhaps they starve, their bodies swallowed by the dust. Perhaps they are hunted by confessors, dragged back in chains to burn before the same crowds they sought to escape. Perhaps worse still, they are found by things in the darkness. The warp-tainted, the corrupted, the Xenos lurking beyond the safety of the cities. Whatever their fate, their disappearance serves the ecclesiarchy just as well as execution, for those left behind know that there is no escape. The Emperor's gaze, carried by his priests, reaches everywhere. The most horrifying part is that the people themselves enforce this cruelty. The ecclesiarchy does not need to search for doubters when entire communities are eager to root them out. Neighbors watch neighbors, friends watch friends, parents watch children. A single slip of the tongue, a moment of weariness mistaken for reluctance, is enough to bring ruin. And so the people live in a constant state of paranoia, their loyalty sharpened not only by fear of priests, but by fear of one another. It is a cage without bars, where everyone is both prisoner and warden. This system breeds an atmosphere where doubt itself becomes unthinkable. The people learn to kill their questions before they can take shape. If they feel hunger, they call it holy sacrifice. If they feel exhaustion, they call it the Emperor's test. If they feel despair, they call it divine humility. Every negative thought is twisted into devotion until the people cannot distinguish between their own suffering and their supposed love of the Emperor. This is how fanaticism survives. It erases not only rebellion, but the very possibility of rebellion. And yet, there are those who feel the weight of it in silence. Late at night, when the chants have faded and the bells lie quiet, some lie awake and wonder if the Emperor truly hears their pain. They wonder why he demands so much, why he gives nothing in return, why his priests live in palaces while his people starve. These thoughts flicker like dying candles, fragile and desperate. Most extinguish them quickly, terrified even of their own minds. But a few cling to them, nurturing them in secret. For those few there is no hope of survival. Doubt cannot be hidden forever, and when it is discovered, it consumes not only them, but everyone they touch. The children are perhaps the most tragic victims. They are sharp-eyed, trained from birth to watch for weakness. When they notice hesitation in a parent's prayers or silence in a sibling's hymns, they believe it is their duty to speak. They march into the arms of priests and confess what they have seen, convinced they are saving their families' souls. And when the accused is dragged away, the children are praised for their vigilance, rewarded for their betrayal. Their tears are ignored, their grief reframed as holy pride. The lesson is carved deep into them. Loyalty is proven by sacrifice, even if that sacrifice is one's own blood. The result is a society that devours itself. Doubters are not only destroyed, but their destruction strengthens the chains that bind the rest. Each execution, each servitor, each disappearance is a warning etched into the memory of the people. The flames of the pyre burn not only the bodies of the accused, but the very idea of questioning. The smoke seeps into the minds of the survivors, suffocating thought, silencing rebellion before it can even form. There is no mercy here, no forgiveness. Doubt is not treated as weakness to be healed, but as corruption to be excised. To doubt is to betray the Emperor, and betrayal is the greatest sin imaginable. It is worse than murder, worse than theft, worse than any crime. To doubt is to invite damnation, not only upon oneself, but upon one's family, one's neighbors, one's entire community. The people believe this not because it is true, but because believing otherwise is unthinkable, and so the planet thrives in its fanaticism. Not because every soul truly believes, but because those who falter are destroyed so completely that their memory serves as a pillar for those who remain. Doubt becomes a myth, a whispered story of weakness told to children as a warning. The faithful do not say, "Do not doubt." They say, "Doubt does not exist." They erase it from language, from thought, from life itself. And in doing so, they ensure that the cycle of suffering continues unbroken. Generation after generation, unquestioned and unchallenged. This is the price of fanaticism, a world where doubt is impossible not because it cannot exist, but because it is annihilated the moment it appears. A world where the sorrows of the doubters are not only their own, but the foundation of everyone else's faith. Whipped into rapture by words of faith repeated until meaning disappears and only rhythm remains. It is during these festivals that mass sacrifices are made. The priests select the most devoted, those who have volunteered for death, and parade them before the people as paragons of faith. These martyrs are dressed in ceremonial robes, their faces painted with oils, and led to altars where their throats are slit or their bodies burned alive. Their screams are not silenced, but amplified, carried across the crowd so that every ear hears them. The priests declare their agony proof of the emperor's glory, and the crowd erupts in chants, praising not the death but the suffering itself. Families weep not out of grief, but pride, for to give a son, daughter, or parent to the flames is the greatest gift they can offer. Sometimes, the sacrifices are not voluntary. Entire groups are chosen at random, declared impure for reasons never explained. They are dragged forward by confessors and lashed to posts or pyres. The crowd does not resist. They cheer, they chant, they raise their voices louder. For to question the priests is to question the emperor, and so the innocent burn alongside the willing, their death swallowed by the roar of the masses. For the people it does not matter who dies. It matters only that death is given, that blood is spilled, that the ritual is completed. Pilgrimages are another pillar of this fanatic culture. Each year, millions set out across wastelands, deserts, and mountains to visit sacred shrines scattered across the planet. These journeys are deliberately brutal. Pilgrims walk barefoot, carrying heavy relics on their backs, often without food or water for days. Thousands die along the way, collapsing from exhaustion or exposure, but their bodies are not retrieved. They are left where they fall, their bones bleaching beneath the sun or sinking into the mud. To return alive is proof of devotion, but to die is considered even greater. Families celebrate when loved ones never come back, convinced that their sacrifice has earned them a place at the emperor's side. The largest pilgrimage is to the Great Basilica of Eternal Flame, a structure so vast it can be seen from orbit. Pilgrims travel from every corner of the planet, some taking months to arrive, to kneel before its burning altars. The basilica is never silent, its great torches fueled by the bodies of martyrs who have been immolated within. The faithful shuffle forward in endless lines, kissing the stone steps worn smooth by billions of lips, smearing blood on the walls as offerings, or branding their own flesh with iron sigils. The sight of thousands of people mutilating themselves in unison is horrifying, but to them it is beauty. Their scars are badges of loyalty, proof that their bodies are no longer their own but tools of the emperor's will. Festivals and pilgrimages are not optional. Attendance is demanded, and absences are noted. Priests record every face, every family, and those who fail to appear are branded heretics. Punishments are swift and brutal. Houses are burned, possessions seized, bloodlines condemned. The people understand that to miss a festival is not simply laziness but treachery. Better to collapse in the streets, gasping your last breath as the crowd tramples over you, than to risk the suspicion of the ecclesiarchy. And so, the planet lives in a cycle of endless preparation. Weeks are spent saving scraps of food, crafting banners, repairing relics, and training choirs for the next great gathering. When the day comes, every hand is raised, every throat is opened, every body given to the ritual. The festivals do not strengthen the people in body, for they leave them starved and broken. They strengthen them in spirit, or at least in obedience. The endless repetition of suffering binds them tighter and tighter to the will of their masters. For outsiders, these spectacles are difficult to comprehend. To watch millions celebrate as children are burned alive, or to see families rejoice as their loved ones are beaten to death in public, is to glimpse a madness so complete that it erases the self. Yet for the people of this planet, there is no madness. There is only faith. They do not see horror. They see salvation. They do not see cruelty. They see devotion, and above it all, the ecclesiarchy smiles. For every festival, every pilgrimage, every sacrifice is proof of their power. The people will give everything, even their lives, without hesitation. They will starve, march, bleed, and die, not because they are forced to, but because they believe it is holy. That is the true genius of fanaticism, to enslave a people so completely that they do not recognize their chains, but polish them and call them sacred. On this planet, festivals and pilgrimages are not moments of respite or celebration. They are tools. Tools to break the body, tools to mold the mind, tools to keep the people forever kneeling. Each gathering strengthens the prison of faith. Each sacrifice adds another bar to the cage. Each pilgrimage ensures that no one ever forgets what they are. They are not citizens. They are worshippers. They are not free. They are offerings. And as the fires burn, as the chants rise, as the people collapse in waves of ecstasy and agony, the world turns ever deeper into the abyss of its own zealotry. This is how the most fanatical planet in the Imperium lives, not in peace, not in prosperity, but in a cycle of suffering sanctified as holiness, of death dressed as devotion. Here, there is no festival without blood, no pilgrimage without death, and no faith without pain. Prayer is dangerous. To operate a press without reciting the proper litany of sanctification is heresy. And so the people labor while chanting, their voices rising and falling like the verses of an endless hymn, until the sound of machines and the sound of prayer become indistinguishable. The cost of this devotion is staggering. The factories claim lives every hour. A missed step leads to crushed limbs, a faulty lever to boiling steam, but no one complains. Death in the manufactorum is considered a holy sacrifice, and the bodies of the fallen are carted away with reverence, their names added to long lists of martyrs posted at the factory gates. Families do not mourn them with tears, but with pride. Their children are told to walk taller, for their bloodline has proven itself more loyal. And yet, for all this sacrifice, the people gain nothing. Their wages are scraps of food, their homes nothing but crumbling tenements pressed against the walls of the factories they serve. The ecclesiarchy teaches them that poverty is purity, that suffering is the emperor's greatest gift. To have nothing is to be free of sin, and so the people embrace their starvation as a sign of devotion. When a family wastes away from hunger, the priests do not lament their deaths. They declare them holy martyrs of deprivation, examples for others to follow. Children are not spared from this cycle. As soon as they can stand, they are sent into the manufactorums beside their parents, tasked with crawling into the smallest, most dangerous spaces to clear gears or ignite furnaces. Their small bodies are broken early, their lungs filled with ash, their skin scarred from burns. They die as easily as they live, but their deaths are celebrated as victories. A child consumed by the machines is not a tragedy. It is a life offered up before it had the chance to sin. The priests walk freely through these factories, clad in robes untouched by the soot and grime that stains the workers. They deliver sermons from high platforms, shouting over the roar of the machines, their words carried by amplified voxcasters. They speak not of mercy or relief, but of endurance. They remind the workers that every blister is a prayer, every scar a blessing, every wound proof of their loyalty. Their words fuel the suffering, sanctifying the very cruelty of the labor system. And when the priests depart, the workers redouble their efforts, desperate to prove their worth. On holy days, the factories do not close. Instead, the work becomes ritualized spectacle. Pilgrims from across the planet are herded into the manufactorums to watch the faithful at their labor. Special hymns are sung, overseers drive the workers harder than ever, and the machines roar louder than before. At the climax of the ritual, one or more workers are chosen at random to be offered to the emperor. They are strapped to the great gears, their bodies crushed as the crowd cheers. Their blood stains the machines, and the priests declare them sanctified relics of devotion. The machines do not stop, and the work does not slow. It never does. It is easy to imagine that the people would resent this, but they do not. They have been taught for generations that labor is the purest form of worship. They believe that each moment of agony feeds the emperor's eternal spirit, that their suffering strengthens his throne against the enemies of mankind. They see themselves not as victims, but as soldiers on a battlefield of industry, fighting a war of faith with hammer and furnace instead of lace gun and bayonet. Their chains are invisible because they believe them to be wings, and so the factories grind on, day after day, year after year, century after century. The planet does not produce only weapons or supplies. It produces faith. It produces zealotry. It produces generations of men and women who believe so completely in their suffering that they will march into any war zone, endure any torment, and never question why. The manufactorums are not simply engines of industry. They are engines of fanaticism, churning out devotion as efficiently as they churn out munitions. When the day ends, if it can be said to end at all, the people file back into the streets, their faces blank with exhaustion. They collapse into their homes, their bodies broken, only to rise again when the bells toll the next morning. There is no escape, no reprieve, no hope of anything beyond the endless cycle of work and worship. And yet they do not despair. They call it blessed. They call it holy. They believe it is the Emperor's will, and that belief sustains them more than food or rest ever could. This is life on the most fanatical planet in the Imperium, a world where even the swing of a hammer is a prayer, where every drop of sweat is treated as a relic, and where the factories themselves are temples of suffering. Here, the body is consumed, the spirit is crushed, and the only thing that remains is devotion. The factories of this world do not just forge weapons. They forge faith, one broken body at a time. Children are not games at all. They do not play at building cities or imagining adventures beyond the stars. They act out rituals of sacrifice, mimic the chants of priests, and pretend to burn toy heretics on makeshift pyres. Wooden effigies of saints are carried through alleyways in miniature processions, their young voices crying out hymns until their throats are raw. Even in play there is no freedom. Their imaginations are shackled, bent toward one unshakable truth. The Emperor demands all, and they must give all. The family unit itself bends under the weight of this system. Parents do not nurture in the way we might understand. They serve instead as enforcers of doctrine within the household. Fathers drill their sons to memorize the litanies, punishing them harshly for the slightest slip. Mothers sing their children to sleep not with songs of comfort, but with psalms of martyrdom, teaching them that nightmares of fire and death are visions of holiness. The home is not a refuge from the priesthood, but an extension of it. Every room is adorned with icons, every corner watched by relics, every meal turned into a sermon. Even in their most private moments, children are not safe from the suffocating grip of faith. Some children break beneath this pressure. They cry too long, hesitate too often, or ask questions they should not ask. And when they do, their fate is sealed. Families hand them over to the clergy, fearful that to protect them would invite accusations of heresy upon the entire household. These children vanish into the hidden halls of the ecclesiarchy, never to be seen again. Rumors whisper that they are taken to serve as test subjects for cruel penances, that they are worked to death in underground forges, or even sacrificed upon altars to remind others of the danger of disobedience. The truth hardly matters. What matters is that everyone understands the lesson. Even the smallest doubt, even the faintest disobedience, is unforgivable, and so the children who remain learn quickly. They learn to silence their tears, to bury their curiosity, to smother any thought that does not align with the litany in their heads. They grow hard and silent, their faces blank masks of obedience before they even reach adolescence. When they march into the squares to chant with the rest of the population, their voices blend seamlessly into the chorus. There is no distinction between them and their parents, no individuality left to recognize. They are already faithful, already broken, already molded. By the time a child comes of age, there is nothing left of them but faith. Their adolescence is marked not by rebellion or self-discovery, but by trials of devotion. Some are locked away for days without food, left to pray until hunger itself feels holy. Others are sent on pilgrimages across vast wastelands, walking until their feet bleed and collapse feels like failure of the soul. Those who endure return stronger in their faith. Those who do not are left where they fall, their deaths celebrated as offerings rather than mourned as tragedies. The ecclesiarchy sees these children not as people, but as resources. The most promising are sent to join the priesthood, their zeal sharpened into tools of control. Others are drafted into the manufactorums, their bodies consumed by endless labor. Many are offered up to the guard, their unquestioning devotion making them perfect soldiers, and some, though never spoken of openly, are given to the Inquisition, vanishing into a life of shadows where their fanaticism becomes a weapon. None of them escape. None of them are free. From birth to death, they are bound in service, their fates decided long before they ever had a chance to choose. Yet ask one of these children if they suffer, and they will tell you no. They will say they are honored, that their lives are rich with purpose, that they are blessed to live on such a holy world. They believe this because they must. To think otherwise is to risk heresy, and to risk heresy is to invite destruction. Their indoctrination runs so deep that they do not even see the chains around their necks. They call them crowns instead, convinced that their endless prayers and sacrifices make them royalty in the eyes of the emperor. This is the tragedy of childhood on the most fanatical planet in the Imperium. It is not that the children are beaten or starved, though they often are. It is not that they are denied joy or freedom, though these things are stolen from them before they ever know them. The true tragedy is that they never realize what has been taken. They grow into adults believing that this is all life can ever be. They never question, never imagine, never dream. The fire of individuality is extinguished in them before it can even spark. And so the cycle continues. Generation after generation, each child raised to believe suffering is holy, each parent complicit in shaping the next into another zealot. The world does not need prisons for its young because indoctrination is a stronger cage than any iron bars could ever be. The ecclesiarchy does not need to fear rebellion because rebellion cannot come from minds that have never learned to think freely. Childhood here is not a beginning. It is the end. By the time they are grown, they are already martyrs waiting for their moment to die. This is how fanaticism survives, not by winning over the old, but by consuming the young of them. Public punishments are as common as sermons. It is not unusual to walk through a city street and see a heretic bound to a pyre, flames licking skyward as the crowd chants in unison, drowning out the screams. Children are made to watch, taught early what the cost of defiance is. The smell of burning flesh is a reminder etched into memory, a warning that seeps into every breath. The ecclesiarchy makes examples not to purge individuals, but to purge the thought of disobedience itself. The power of the priests does not end with punishment. It extends into the very marrow of life. Marriages are arranged not by love or family, but by clerical decree, chosen for the greater purity of bloodlines and the service of the emperor. Birth is not celebrated privately, but performed in the presence of holy witnesses, each child baptized in sacred oils before they can even draw their first full breath. Work is not organized by practical necessity, but as a spiritual duty, with priests assigning labor to ensure that all effort is directed toward worship. Even rest is claimed by the ecclesiarchy. Sleep is regulated by the tolling of bells, dreams interrupted by sudden midnight sermons that call entire districts into the streets for prayer. There is no sanctuary from the priesthood, no hour of the day when their presence is not felt. In the rare silence between rituals, the people know only fear, for silence is dangerous. It allows for thought, and thought can lead to doubt. Better to fill every moment with hymns, no matter how hollow, than to risk the whisper of heresy within. The priests themselves live as gods among men. Their palaces rise higher than the tenements of the faithful, adorned with gold leaf and filled with relics said to carry the emperor's blessing. They feast while the people starve, their tables heavy with exotic foods imported from across the sector. Yet no one dares resent them. To resent them would be to resent the emperor himself, for the ecclesiarchy teaches that their authority is divine, unquestionable, and eternal. The suffering of the people is not a flaw in the system, but a holy burden placed upon them by the will of the throne. This is how the ecclesiarchy maintains its grip, not through persuasion, not through love, but through terror sanctified as faith. It is not enough for the people to obey. They must adore their own suffering. They must see every lash, every hunger pang, every lost child as a gift, proof of their devotion. The clergy does not simply demand obedience. They demand joy in obedience, rapture in torment, ecstasy in death. It is a cruel perfection of control, one that allows the priests to mold entire populations into tools of unquestioning loyalty. And if, by some chance, doubt takes root in an individual heart, it is not long before it is ripped out. Families are expected to betray their own, to report any whispers of dissent. A father will hand over his son for the crime of hesitation during prayer. A mother will condemn her daughter for a moment's lapse in zeal. To protect a heretic is heresy itself, and so the population polices itself with even greater zeal than the clergy above them. Fear does not come only from the lash of the priest, but from the watchful eyes of neighbors, friends, and kin. The result is a society where truth no longer exists. There is only what the ecclesiarchy declares. If they say the emperor appeared in a vision to bless the harvest, then it is so, even if the fields lie barren. If they claim a child is possessed by demons, then the child will burn, even if her only crime was to cry out in hunger. If they decree that entire districts are corrupted by sin, then the faithful will set fire to their own homes, singing hymns as the flames consume them. Reality itself is bent and broken by the will of the priests, And the people accept it, because to resist is to die. And yet, in their hearts, the people do not see themselves as slaves. They believe they are holy warriors, even in their daily lives. They believe their pain is sacred, their blood is an offering, their suffering a shield that guards the Imperium against the enemies lurking in the void. They do not see the chains around their throats because those chains are carved with the Emperor's sigil. To them, oppression is devotion, and devotion is the highest honor a human can aspire to. This is the true genius of the ecclesiarchy's iron grip. They do not merely control bodies or even minds. They control souls. They have reshaped humanity itself into a weapon of faith, a population incapable of seeing freedom as anything but sin. The priests know that, so long as the people worship their own suffering, their hold will never break. The planet will continue to feed the Imperium with martyrs, soldiers, and unwavering devotion, no matter how much it bleeds. And so, day after day, the bells toll, the sermons roar, and the pyres burn. The people kneel, the priests command, and the world turns ever deeper into fanaticism. This is not governance. This is not leadership. This is dominion in its purest form. Faith sharpened into a blade, wielded with merciless precision by the ecclesiarchy's hand. The rhythm of life here is dictated not by natural cycles of the sun, but by ritual. When morning comes, it is announced not by light, but by the deafening toll of bells. Every cathedral, every temple, every holy tower across the surface of the planet joins in one vast chorus. The sound drowns the land, a wave of metallic thunder that leaves no space for sleep. Men, women, and children rise not because they wish to, but because they must. They kneel on the hard stone floors of their homes and begin their day with the same ritual chant, the Catechism of Dawn. Attendance at communal prayer is not optional. Failure to appear even once brings punishment ranging from flogging to accusations of heresy. To imagine millions of people crammed together into squares and courtyards every morning, chanting the same words until their voices merge into one, is to understand that this is not worship as a choice. This is worship as survival, and so the day continues in the same fashion. Factories hum not as places of industry, but as sacred sites of penance, each strike of a hammer treated as an act of worship. Processions of the faithful flood the streets, often carrying relics or statues, often ending with acts of self-inflicted pain. Sermons are endless, stretching for hours at a time. Priests shout from pulpits with such fury that their words seem to shake the very air. It is not the law that rules here, it is the will of the ecclesiarchy, and the word of a priest carries more weight than iron or stone. To someone looking in from the outside, this might seem insanity. And in truth it is. But in the grim darkness of the galaxy, such madness is also a shield. The temptations of chaos, the corruption of Xenos, the despair of endless war, these things gnaw at the hearts of humanity everywhere. But on this world, the people are so tightly bound to their God-Emperor that no crack is allowed to form. Every mind is sealed, every soul locked in a cage of gold and incense. Doubt is burned out of existence, replaced with certainty as solid as the walls of their great cathedrals. The cost of such devotion, however, is staggering. Fanaticism does not come free. It devours not just time, but flesh and blood. Food is always scarce because fasting is considered holy. Clothing is rough and plain because vanity is sin. Comfort is forbidden because comfort breeds weakness, and weakness is only a step away from heresy. Families starve in the name of faith. Entire communities collapse from exhaustion during holy pilgrimages. Children grow up playing games of martyrdom, their laughter echoing with chants of death in the Emperor's name. Life here is not measured in years or accomplishments, but in how much suffering one endures before death finally takes them, and that death is never meaningless. The more violent, the more painful, the more public, the greater the glory. It is not uncommon for entire districts to engage in competitions, each one attempting to outdo the others in acts of sacrifice. To us, this might look like cruelty, but to them, it is the highest calling. They have been taught since birth that to die screaming in agony for the Emperor is not a tragedy, but a triumph. The Imperium sees great value in this. For all its madness, a world such as this is an engine of faith and obedience. Its people are not innovators or thinkers, but soldiers, clerics, and martyrs. They provide a steady stream of manpower for the endless wars that rage across the galaxy. What better stock to draw from than men and women who have been conditioned since birth to see hesitation as sin and death as glory? Such fanatics do not break on the battlefield. They do not flee. They fight until their bodies are torn apart, because the alternative, living in shame, or worse, in doubt, is unthinkable. To walk through the streets of this planet is to enter another world entirely. The air is alive with chanting. The sound of bells never fades. Everywhere, priests march with whips, punishing those who fall behind. Families kneel together, reciting the same psalms again and again until their voices are hoarse. No one laughs, no one dreams of another life, no one speaks of desire or ambition. Conversation itself has become ritual. To live here is to drown in a sea of faith, until even the thought of individuality ceases to exist. And yet for all this, the people do not despair. They do not ask for freedom, because they do not know what it is. They do not imagine rebellion, because rebellion is heresy, and heresy is damnation. They believe utterly and completely that their lives are holy offerings, that every lash of the whip, every empty stomach, every death in the streets is a necessary act to protect humanity from the darkness outside. The galaxy beyond might be filled with horror, but here, at least, they believe themselves safe beneath the Emperor's gaze. But belief and reality are not the same. The truth is far crueler. This planet is not a paradise of faith, but a prison built from it. The walls are not stone, but prayer. The guards are not soldiers, but priests. Every moment of every life is watched, judged, weighed, and found wanting. It is not love that sustains this world, but fear. Fear of chaos, fear of heresy, fear of what would happen if, even for a second, they stopped believing. And so the planet endures. A world without joy, without freedom, without self. A world that consumes its own people in fire and ash, and calls it devotion. To the Imperium, it is the most fanatical planet in the galaxy. To its people, it is simply life. They do not see the chains that bind them, because those chains were forged in the Emperor's name, and to them, that makes them holy. This is not just faith. It is fanaticism raised to the level of existence itself.